Okay, let's unpack this. We are about to go on a deep dive into some material that is, I think it's fair to say, foundational for understanding the modern world.
It really is. It's a powerful and, frankly, a pretty intense critique.
Absolutely. We're looking at the work of Seraphim Rose, specifically his book Nihilism, The Root of the Revolution of the Modern Age.
Monumental work.
It is, and for our time here, our mission isn't just to give you a quick summary. We want to lay out a detailed, structured roadmap of his central thesis.
Which is a chilling one.
It is. The idea that all the upheaval, the chaos of the last century or so, isn't just an accident of politics or economics. Rose argues it's the inevitable result of a conscious foundational war against absolute truth.
Right. We're trying to uncover the hidden engine, the philosophical engine that's been driving this whole modern revolution.
And what's fascinating here is how Rose immediately steers us away from, simple disbelief or atheism. He frames it as something much bigger.
He does. It's not a lack of faith, he says. It's an intellectual and spiritual war against truth, with a capital T. So if we really want to get a handle on this revolutionary age, we have to start with the core concept. We have to define nihilism.
And he doesn't mess around with secondary sources. He goes straight to the man himself, Friedrich Nietzsche, who was maybe the most honest spokesman for this whole idea. So what's that core definition?
It's pure and it's uncompromising. For Nietzsche, nihilism is the belief that, well, let me get it exact, that there is no truth, that there is no absolute state of affairs, no thing in itself.
Wow. So that's the extreme thesis, a total negation of any kind of objective reality.
Exactly. Now, the version of this that we all know, the one that's kind of seeped into the culture, is that softer phrase, all truth is relative.
Right. That's the popular translation. It sounds much more, palatable.
It sounds sophisticated, even humble, like you're respecting all viewpoints equally.
But it's a trap.
It's the ultimate intellectual sleight of hand. I mean, Rose points out the logical contradiction is right there on the surface, and it's absolutely destructive.
How so?
Well, think about it. The statement, all truth is relative, is presented as an absolute, undeniable truth.
Right. It's a dogmatic statement that says there's no dogma.
Exactly. The very act of saying it refutes the premise. It collapses in on itself. Rose argues that if there's any truth at all, even something as basic as scientific truth, the laws of physics, it can't be merely relative.
It can't just be subject to my personal whim or the cultural mood.
No. The first principles of any system of knowledge have to be unchangeable. They have to be absolute. If they're not, if we can't even agree on the criteria for what makes something true, then the entire concept of knowledge it falls apart.
So that structural denial, it takes nihilism far beyond something like simple skepticism. Skepticism is just doubt.
Right. But nihilism is the outright denial that coherence is even possible. And from there, this intellectual stance immediately connects to the spiritual realm. If truth isn't absolute, then the question of God becomes unavoidable.
It becomes central.
That's the critical pivot. The intellectual question of truth inevitably, it leads you to the ultimate question, the question of revelation.
Divine revelation.
Yes. Rose really emphasizes that the last 400 years of modern thought have basically been one long experiment, an experiment operating on the assumption that there is no revealed truth from God.
And what's the conclusion of that experiment?
Absolute negation. I mean, the logic is pretty straightforward. If God hasn't revealed truth, then man has to find it for himself. And when he fails, and he does fail, he has to conclude that if there's no revealed truth, then there's no truth at all.
And from that single premise, the whole structure of Western civilization just starts to rot from the inside out.
It does. And if there is no higher truth, the nihilist project doesn't just stop at denial. It has to move to actively abolish the memory of what was denied.
It goes from being passive to being active annihilation.
Exactly. The ultimate goal, as Rose frames it, is, and I'm quoting here, the annihilation of divine revelation and the preparation of a new order in which there shall be no trace of the old view of things, in which man shall be the only God there is.
That is a staggering statement, a systematic, universal counter-revolution against Christianity.
Aiming for a totally human-centered reality.
That thesis, that the whole idea of modern progress is actually a revolutionary war, it's incredibly powerful. And to help us understand how we got from, say, polite disbelief to total war, Rose outlines this very distinct progression, a kind of four-stage process.
And that structure is so important for getting clarity on this. We're going to trace this whole development, starting with what seems like a harmless intellectual retreat, the polite society that paved the way, and then move through this aggressive materialistic assault.
And then into the messier stuff.
Right. Then we plunge into the chaos of pure subjectivity and destruction, and finally, we'll look at the ultimate hidden agenda, producing the new man. It's a journey that takes us from academic drawing rooms right into the heart of the abyss.
Okay, let's start that journey. Stage one of this nihilist dialectic.
Yeah.
What Rose calls liberalism or passive nihilism. You called it the neutral breeding ground. What exactly was liberalism's role in all this?
Well, liberalism was absolutely crucial precisely because it was passive. It wasn't, openly hostile to traditional Christian truth.
It didn't launch a frontal assault.
No.
No.
But it did something far more insidious. It made truth irrelevant. Liberalism created this intellectual climate where transcended absolute truth just. It no longer occupied the center of attention. It got pushed to the margins.
But, and this is the really deceptive part, they kept all the old language, right? They were still talking about eternal verities, faith, Christian civilization.
Oh, absolutely. But the serious commitment to those words had been completely hollowed out. They became aesthetic terms, just metaphors to evoke a feeling, a sense of tradition, but they were totally devoid of any real intellectual or governing power.
So the concepts were just weakened until they were useless.
Functionally impotent, exactly.
Yeah. So if you connect this to the bigger picture, to theology, what happened to the concept of God during this liberal phase?
The change was, it was profound, but also very subtle. The true God, the living, omnipresent God of Revelation who actually acts in the world, he gets replaced. He's replaced by this safe, distant, mental construct.
Yeah.
The dead god of philosophers.
That's the passive nihilism right there.
It is. It's inherent in movements like deism and idealism.
Hold on a second. For anyone listening who might find those terms a bit abstract, can you break down deism and idealism for us?
Sure, of course. Think of deism like this. God is the ultimate clockmaker. He created the universe, wound it all up, set the immutable laws of physics in motion, and then he just stepped back.
He's out of the picture.
He's necessary as a first cause, to make the philosophical system work. But he is completely powerless, or at least unwilling, to intervene in the human story. And idealism is similar. It kind of reduces God to an internal spirit or some vague unifying power that inspires worldly optimism, but it demands no obedience. It makes no absolute moral claims.
So this God is functionally inert.
A God considerably weaker and less demanding than the men who were philosophizing about him.
And Rose shows that the ethical implications of this were immediate, especially when it came to death and eternal life.
Right. In the traditional Christian order, everything you do in this life is judged in light of the life to come. But once that faith in a transcendent reality starts to weaken, the future life becomes, well, at best it's a shadowy underworld.
Or more often, just rhetoric.
Just rhetoric. An emotional projection, a nice thought to console yourself with, but not a reality that actually dictates how you behave.
And the blindness to the real meaning of death seems total in this liberal framework. They really believed you could still live a moral, civilized life, even if you believed that death meant total, absolute.
It's a fool's paradise. The deeper logic, the more terrifying logic, is that of Ivan Karamazov from Dostoevsky.
If there is no immortality, all things are lawful.
Exactly. Humanist stoicism, just relying on good manners and tradition, that has to collapse. It has to. When the full, horrifying implications of extinction really sink in, why would you be good today if it means absolutely nothing tomorrow?
And this philosophical compromise, it gets mirrored in their political structures too. Liberal governments try this balancing act.
They do. Between divine monarchy, which is authority from above, and anarchy, which is rule from below, from the people.
And they try to combine them.
They try to synthesize the two. And you end up with these formulas that just cancel each other out, like ruling by the grace of God and the will of the people. This indecision, it just shows the fatal flaw. There's no opposing truth anymore. The liberal offers concessions, hoping they can stop the revolution halfway.
But as Rose points out, the revolution can't be stopped halfway.
Absolutely not. It's a force. Once it's awakened, it will not rest until it ends in a totalitarian kingdom of this world. The revolutionary doesn't see the liberals' concessions as moderation.
They see it as weakness.
As a confirmation that the old order has no real transcendent truth left to defend itself with.
And that fatal weakness leads directly into stage two, realism, the active assault phase. So Realism is basically just disillusioned liberalism, right? That the polite society didn't work, so the next generation got angry.
That's a perfect way to put it. Realism, which covers things like naturalism and positivism, is this aggressive shift toward the concrete, the verifiable, the factual. Its followers are the nothing but reductionists.
Nothing.
They reduce everything. All spiritual life is nothing but matter. All thought is nothing but sensation. All higher concepts are just simple physical processes.
This brings us to a really key concept Rose talks about. Scientism. And this isn't science itself.
No, absolutely not. It's the illegitimate extension of scientific criteria to everything.
It's a kind of intellectual arrogance.
It is. It's the prideful attempt to build the Tower of Babel all over again. You amass this enormous collection of facts, hoping that if you just get enough empirical data, you can somehow scale the heights of truth from below. But facts, without any unifying principles, are just disconnected data points.
So scientism becomes a worship of the fact, not a love of truth.
It's a parody of real knowledge. And Rose, he grounds this in historical patterns. He points out that this kind of rejection of higher truth in favor of technical know-how isn't new.
He goes back to the church fathers.
He does. He cites St. Basil the Great, who talked about pagan scientists who willfully shut their eyes to the knowledge of the truth, even though they could see so clearly into the vain sciences of their day. Rose says the motive is the same, a fanatical devotion to this world, which hardens that old liberal indifference into outright hostility towards anything transcendent.
And this realist simplification, it paves the way for what the historian Jacob Burckhardt called the terrible simplificateurs.
The terrible simplifiers.
The terrible simplifiers. And we see this intellectual realism get translated into truly terrifying political systems. You think of someone like Hitler.
Right. And Rose argues that Hitler's monstrous nihilism didn't come from some dark, esoteric mysticism. It rested on a bedrock of something completely unexceptional, extremely common, typical realism.
That's a really challenging claim. How does Rose show Hitler as a realist?
By detailing his practical materialism. Hitler had this crude faith in science, progress, and enlightenment. It was coupled with this very practical outlook that just scorned traditional theology and metaphysics.
He describes his crude worship of efficiency and utility.
Yes, and notes Hitler's ready toleration of birth control, his welcoming of sterilization, his personal delight in modern machines, in speed. He was a product of his time.
So he wasn't just a totalitarian monster. He was the ultimate expression of the modern man who believes only in the physical, the efficient, the immediately useful.
Precisely. He was proud of his gift for reducing all problems to their simplest foundations. And this simplistic, crude, purely worldly worldview, the realist Weltanschauung, that is the spiritual vacuum where gross superstitions and a total collapse of all moral standards could just thrive.
So the realist closes off heaven.
And resolves to live solely for this world. And in doing so, he paves the way for the subhumanity of the new man, because at the end of the day, nothing is sacred anymore.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We're moving from that cold, rational assault of realism into stage 3, vitalism. This feels like a much more subjective, almost chaotic reaction against that sterile realist world.
It is. Vitalism comes from a place of frustration. It's a reaction against realism's extreme intellectual simplification. The reduction of man to just a machine.
The vitalists feel that coldness.
They feel the coldness, the dehumanization of a purely technological system, and they reject the sterile utopia that it promises.
But, and this is the crucial distinction, they don't go back to truth. They actually accept realism's central premise, the rejection of Christian truth.
Yes, that's key. They reject the rationalist path, but they cling to that nihilist foundation. So instead of truth, vitalism embraces things like life, vitality, impulse, experience.
Feeling becomes paramount.
It does. Rose calls this the final divorce of life from truth. Subjective feeling and raw sensation completely replace subjective reality.
I can see how that would play out psychologically. I mean, if you've denied God and then you've also rejected the sterile rationalism of the nothing but realists, where do you even look for meaning?
You look inward, or you just look toward movement, action. The awakened multitudes, as Rose calls them, who have lost faith in a transcendent God, they begin this restless, almost frenetic search for a substitute.
And this restlessness, which used to be for the philosophical elite, it now just permeates the masses.
It does, and it manifests as this widespread spiritual and psychological disorientation.
Rose cites some really striking examples of this popular unrest, and they feel incredibly modern. Things like crime that seems to have no motive.
Exactly. He points specifically to crime, particularly juvenile crime, that has no comprehensible cause like greed or lust. It's the crime of the absurd.
And when these individuals are caught, what's their explanation? They say they acted on a mere impulse or an urge.
Or out of sheer boredom,
Oh.
resentment, that emptiness. That's the core nihilist impulse trying to escape the prison of meaninglessness.
He notes other things, too.
He does. The cult of the automobile and speed just movement for the sake of movement. The primitive, often savage character of popular music, which he referred to as jazz, and this morbid worship of youth and physical prowess in sports.
So these are all just attempts to find meaning or excitement or some kind of transcendence in raw, physical, immediate sensation.
And it's all completely divorced from any higher purpose. This spiritual vacuum creates the perfect environment for pseudo-spirituality to flourish. If Christian truth is seen as outmoded, people will run to any source that promises vitality or realization.
A spiritual supermarket.
That's a great way to put it. You see the rise of these new thought sects where God is reduced to some vague, immanent force, a kind of electrical power you can harness with positive thinking.
And occultism explodes.
Occultism, spiritism, spurious Eastern wisdom, and this whole generalized cult of awareness or realization, which is often pursued through things like Zen Buddhism or psychedelic drugs.
So this is a really sophisticated nihilist tactic, isn't it? It's not the frontal assault of realism trying to disprove God.
No, it's much more subtle. It's a new spirituality that's designed to attach itself to healthy religious impulses in order to destroy them from within. It replaces substance with pure sensation.
It's an advanced stage of the disease.
It is. Where realism failed, trying to build up absolute truth from below, vitalism just accepts that failure and reduces everything even further. Not to matter, but to subjective experience. The world just dissolves into pure flux, movement, action, the excitement of being original or experimental.
So vitalism, even though it's searching for life, is ultimately just a product of corruption and world weariness. And this subjective chaos leads directly to the final stage, stage 4, the nihilism of destruction.
And this stage, this is the purest form of the doctrine. It's an absolute visceral rage against creation. In this stage, destruction isn't a means to some political end.
It is the end.
It is an end in itself. This is the horrifying fulfillment of that philosophical principle. There is no truth. All is permitted.
And you see this principle embodied in figures like Michael Bakunin, the father of anarchism.
Bakunin expressed this fusion of vitalism and destruction perfectly. He said, the passion for destruction is also a creative passion. He even admitted that if his ideal new social order ever came into existence, he would at once begin to pull down again everything I had made.
So the goal isn't replacement, it's just negation.
Total negation.
Yeah.
And Rose connects this destructive impulse to the grand sweep of global conflict. He frames Hitler's role in the Second World War as negative preliminary.
What does he mean by that?
The physical destruction of the war served a larger revolutionary program. The physical smashing of the old order was a necessary prelude to the spiritual and social smashing that would come later.
And Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, he actually saw this happening.
He did. He exulted in the Allied bombing of German cities. He argued that the bombs had smashed the prison walls of bourgeois restraint. He believed the destruction was necessary to force Europe to rebuild, and in that process to destroy everything old and outworn.
So it completed the nihilism of destruction.
It stripped away the final masks and completely cleared the slate for the new.
We've traced this dialectic then, from a passive intellectual retreat in liberalism to materialistic assault with realism, into chaotic subjective experience with vitalism, and finally to pure negation with destruction. But now we have to get to the absolute root of it all, the spiritual core. And this isn't just disbelief, is it? It's a conscious, active war against God.
And this raises a really important question that needs some clarification. Rose is very careful to distinguish between simple atheism and what he calls antitheism.
What's the difference?
Atheism is passive. It's a simple lack of belief and indifferent denial. Antitheism, which is the heart of nihilism, is active. It's hatred, it's war, it's a deliberate, conscious desire to abolish the divine.
So the nihilist isn't happy to just say God doesn't exist. They have to actively work to eliminate the very concept from reality.
Precisely. Proudhon declared that the revolution is not atheistic. It eliminates it. It doesn't want to debate, it wants to liquidate. And Bakunin's famous line just sums up this proactive rebellion perfectly. If God really existed, it would be necessary to abolish him.
And the motivation for this, Rose argues, is rooted in what he calls satanic pride.
Yes, a pride that just spurns subjection to any authority at all, whether it's divine or human.
But why such a fierce hatred? Why is the war against God so ruthless?
Because the existence of even a single person of genuine, consistent Christian faith completely refutes the entire nihilist project.
Ow.
That faith proves that absolute truth and a higher authority exist. And if they exist, then the doctrine of all is permitted just collapses. The nihilist rejection isn't born out of cold logic. It comes from a non-rational passion. It's a primal rebellion against the authority, the obedience, the self-restraint that faith demands.
So the revolutionary senses that Christian truth resides in faith, and their own rebellious conscience demands they abolish that faith just to justify their own self-worship and their demand for absolute autonomy.
It's a spiritual necessity for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the result of this conscious war is the ultimate philosophical crisis, the worship of nothingness.
That's an intense idea. That modern philosophy is actually trying to undo creation itself. It's a project of total cosmic reversal.
It is precisely that. Nihilism is an attempt to annul God's creatio ex nihilo, the doctrine of creation out of nothing, by returning the entire world to nihil, to nothingness.
You can't just get rid of God overnight.
No. The God who was once so real in the Western consciousness, you can't just dispose of him. So what's left at the center of modern man's faith, when the object of that faith has been murdered, is a dead God, a great void.
And the spiritual vacuum is what gives rise to the world of the absurd. If the universe doesn't have God as its central point of orientation, it fails to cohere. It falls apart.
Rose illustrates this so well using Nietzsche's imagery after the murder of God. The nihilist looks out at the universe and just sees incoherence. Does not empty space breathe upon us? Has it not become colder? Does not night come on continually, darker and darker?
That's the spiritual landscape of the age.
It is. A world where there's neither up nor down, right nor wrong, true nor false.
And Rose points out that many of the architects of this negation, the Antitheists, they explicitly glory in their adversarial connection to God. They openly invoke the figure of Satan.
They absolutely do. Bakunin sided with Satan, the eternal rebel, the non-servium, the one who refuses to serve. And Proudhon was even more explicit. He called out, "Come to me, Lucifer, Satan, I will act as spokesman for you."
So Rose sees the entire modern revolution not as some political or economic accident.
No, he sees it as a direct, conscious, spiritual manifestation of the adversarial force that is attempting to invert creation itself.
So if that war against God is the root, then the next part of the analysis has to be the constructive side of the nihilist program. Destruction clears the way for something else.
It does. This is the creation of a new earth and the ultimate transformation or mutation of humanity itself.
The ultimate goal, then, is absolute worldliness. A kingdom that is purely human, totally organized for man, and explicitly against the true God.
This is what Rose calls the absolute despotism of worldliness. Since there's no heaven, man has to maximize his satisfaction and his control right here on earth. The realist philosophy, when you translate it into political action, culminates in a regime of total organization that leaves no room for anything transcendent.
And Rose points to Lenin's vision for the state, which is just a chilling blueprint for this total organization.
Lenin described the transitional stage, the dictatorship of the proletariat, as a state where the whole of society will have become one office and one factory with equal work and equal pay.
Every person is standardized, interchangeable,
and dedicated solely to collective production. It sounds like a perfectly efficient, inescapable prison.
and it's designed to be inescapable.
It has to be. The organization must be so total, so all-encompassing, that Lenin himself said, there will be no way of getting away from it, there will be nowhere to go.
Yeah.
The environment itself is fashioned, physically and psychologically, to perpetually remind men that their only reality, their only happiness, their only duty is right here in this world.
There's no retreat, no
Yeah.
sanctuary.
None. And this total transformation of the environment requires the creation of the new man, a mutation of human nature itself. The human soul has to be molded to fit this factory prison.
And this goal, it's shared across all the revolutionary extremes, whether it's communist or fascist.
Absolutely. Hitler and Rosenberg wanted, out of a new life myth, to create a new human type. But Marx and Engels were just as explicit. They stated that the alteration of men on a mass scale is necessary.
And they thought the revolution was necessary not just to overthrow the ruling class.
No, but also to rid the revolutionaries themselves of what they called the muck of ages, all the old Christian and traditional conditioning.
So this involves a systematic uprooting.
A systematic uprooting, disintegration, and mobilizing of the individual. This is done through violence, social upheaval, and the standardization of realism. The goal is to create the skeptical, rootless, mobile mass man who is devoid of deep loyalties and ready to be molded into the final, definitive form of the man-god.
How does Rose argue we can see evidence of this mutation in real life, especially in culture?
He points to the prophetic quality of post-World War II art. After that most concentrated era of nihilism, from 1914 to 1945, abstract art starts to give way to identifiable human shapes. And some critics proclaim this as a return to man.
But the human figures created by artists like Giacometti or Dubuffet or Bacon, they were anything but comforting. They are terrifying.
They're the tangible, visual confirmation of the spiritual destruction that took place. Rose describes this art as subhuman and demonic. These figures, they aren't depicted as victims of some violent external attack.
They're born deformed.
Exactly. They are skeletal, reduced, often enclosed or entrapped, lacking any basic human feeling.
Rose argues this art is the portrait of the new man.
It's the portrait of a world where man is dead. The crisis of nihilism is over. The work of destruction is complete. The negative image of the human being is now fully realized, dehumanized, reduced to the most basic level, and just waiting for his final definitive shape as a creature solely of the earth.
Okay, so what does this all mean? If we trace these four stages of the dialectic liberalism, realism, vitalism, and destruction, Rose is arguing that the war against God has been, well, successfully prosecuted at the societal level.
Yes, the societal foundations that were built on transcendent truth have been annihilated. And what we're left with is the new man. And whether he's the positive image, the enthusiastic scientist, or the organizational idealist, or the negative image, that desolate, absurd figure in the modern art gallery, he is essentially the same creature.
He's triumphed over faith.
And in doing so, he has lost the idea of being a pilgrim looking toward heaven.
But Rose warns us that nihilism is just the prelude. It's not the final act.
That's right. Beyond all the chaos of nihilism lies the new age, which will be the perfection of nihilism. It's the positive construction of the kingdom of man, built on the ruins of the denial of the kingdom of God.
And this goal has three powerful corollaries that make up the ultimate revolutionary dream.
The first corollary is this conception of a whole new time in history, one that is set up absolutely against everything that has existed before. Nietzsche believed his ideas would divide the history of mankind in two.
A clean slate, year zero.
Precisely. The second is the transformation of man into the man-god, or the superman. If God is abolished, the only logical conclusion for the nihilist is the deification of man. The revolutionary Kirillov from Dostoevsky put it perfectly. If there is no God, then I am God.
The new man is stripped of old loyalties and now waiting to be molded into this godlike, self-worshipping shape.
And the third corollary is the final political order, which is hinted at in all the revolutionary myths. And that order is anarchy.
But not chaos.
Not chaos, no. It's the perfect, frictionless, self-regulating society that is supposedly achieved after the withering away of the state. It's the ultimate fulfillment of the self-worship dream, an order of perfect human freedom because all external constraints, divine or earthly, have been eliminated.
That is the truly terrifying inversion that Rose describes, a satanic imitation of the kingdom of God, which culminates in the reign of Antichrist, the corruption of the best, producing the worst possible thing.
All nihilism points to this end. The nihilists are the prophets of Satan, refusing to serve God and instead waging war against him with the very gifts, intellect, freedom, the capacity for organization that he gave them.
But despite the apparent success of this 400-year war, Rose concludes with this powerful, almost paradoxical point that the nihilist is ultimately defeated. Why? I mean, if they've abolished God in the hearts of men and turned the earth into their factory prison, how are they defeated?
Because nihilism, by its very definition, desires annihilation. It wishes to eliminate God, eliminate creation, and ultimately to eliminate itself by returning everything to absolute nothingness.
But Rose argues that this wish is proved futile.
It is. The universe maintains its coherence. Existence remains. Even in eternal rejection, the reality of absolute truth and eternal consequence remains.
And that coherence exists even in defiance of them.
Yes. Rose's concluding thought is a powerful challenge to the entire modern project. He asserts that even in the face of this ultimate negation, the nihilist is defeated, because in hell his deepest wish is proved futile.
And he finishes with this.
It is the great and invincible truth of Christianity that there is no annihilation. All nihilism is in vain.
A profound point to leave you with, especially when you think about the construction of the new man emerging from the ruins of our age. If the nihilist dream is the man-god, dedicated to absolute autonomy and organization, what final unbearable burden must that human god carry when his absolute power meets the absolute eternal limits of reality? Think on that as you navigate the modern landscape.